Thank you. Good evening. I'm going to call this meeting of the Lawrence Alliance for Education Board of Directors meeting to order. I just will note for the record that present from the LAE Board, Jess Anders, Julia Silverio, Mayor Dan Rivera, Dr. Noemi Custodia Laura, and myself, John Connolly, are present, giving us a quorum. And of course, we are also joined by Superintendent Paris. At this time, we'll rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, we will have public comment. I have two people signed up. Mr. Mali, we'll call you first.
Humayun Mali, 53 Chester Street. Good evening, honorable members. Lawrence always strong, Lawrence always united. The tragic event of the September 13 fire, death, evacuation, and explosion makes our citizens more resilient and more persistent to overcome this adversity. We, the citizen, grateful to Honorable Cynthia Paris to keep our schools open in the South. Frightened children, disdained from their families, live in a subhuman condition, away from their homes. Only feel good when they spend their times at the school. Thank you for helping those children in this hard time. We are grateful to our teachers and the union for acting as our children's family and help them in a time of crisis. While we mourn the death of our beloved child, has been 30 days since the tragic event of September 13. We demand of Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Haley to file complaint against Columbia Gas for murder, mayhem, and destruction. We, the Laurentians, with one voice saying, Lawrence always strong, always united. We are united to overcome these tough times. We demand of you support our teachers and their union. In this season of fighting and struggle, let's move forward. Remember, Lawrence always strong, always united. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mali. On the list, Daniel Rivera.
How you doing? I didn't get to put something on the agenda, so I thought this was important to do. Dan Rivera, 1 Thomas Road. Just a quick update on the events of September 13th and the progress here to date. Just an update from today. They have about 44.5 miles of pipe to fix in the street. They're at 50.1% of the pipe replaced. They're starting to replace appliances in people's homes and getting people relighted with gas. 22% of the service lines that need to be done are at homes or businesses are actually done. About 18% of those are gas ready. We have about 783 Lawrence families in housing, and that's from hotels to apartments. And then we also have 12 families at the South Common RV community. There is progress. There's preparations that are being made for cold weather, a cold weather event. We have a large-scale shelter that's ready to go in case something happens. Can go up to 1,000 people. We're showing people how to shelter in place as well. We have a lot of people working. A committee called the nonprofit working group has worked to figure out how to get people showers, how to get people fed, all those things. While all this is happening, we've had a couple incidents at our schools, and I'm sure somebody else will talk about it too, but I just think it's important to say none so far. Incidents with schools on the north side have been related to the gas event of September 13th. The smell of gas in South Lawrence has happened in the cases where there was work happening in the street, but there wasn't stuff that's related inside the building altogether. And so I think it's important for folks to know that your kids are safe in school. And the one school that is gas heated, it's the Breen in the south side that still needs to be remediated. It's in the process of getting that done. And I'm hoping that they'll have that ready to go before it gets too cold to be in the school. But just want to make sure everybody knew where we are as of today, and we have every expectation that people will be home with hot water and heat by November 19th. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. At this point, I'm going to move to report of the chair on the agenda. I'm going to be very brief. Just want to note two things. First, I just want to thank Dr. Custodio Laura and Northern Essex Community College and the Lawrence Partnership for hosting a reception, a welcoming reception for the superintendent last night. It was a very nice event, but I think more importantly, spoke to the great partnership between Northern Essex and Lawrence Public Schools and all that is being done and will hopefully continue to grow and prosper on behalf of and for creating opportunities for young people in Lawrence. The second thing I just wanted to note was my deepest thanks and appreciation to the mayor and the superintendent for their great leadership through this crisis and this just awful time. The two of you have been remarkable in your steady, calm, and organized response to life-threatening emergencies. And we know that the community continues to deal with it through this day and will continue to deal with it. And I'm just very thankful in my role for each of your leadership. And I just wanted to note that tonight. At this time, I will just open it up for any brief remarks any board members wish to make at this time. Okay, with that said, I'm going to turn it over to the superintendent for her report, and I'm also going to turn over the superintendent to also call the next two items after that report as she sees fit for the briefings that we'll receive on facilities and the assessment and accountability data. Superintendent?
Thank you. I just want to echo the sentiments shared here about the strength of our community since September the 13th. I'm truly, truly honored to be part of a community that shows enormous amount of resilience, compassion, and hard-working team. I want to especially thank our facilities team, including Anne Marie and her team, who have put in countless hours. Our mayor, of course, who has responded and collaborated with us. Without their continued support, our families, our staff members, and our students wouldn't be experiencing some sense of returning to the things that they know how to do well, which is teaching and learning. So I've had the opportunity to complete all of my school visits, and this is part of my listening tour. And I've seen the great work that's happening in our schools, including all the things that staff members, school leaders have done to support the community. There's been a lot of potlucks that have been hosted. There have been fundraisers. There have been opportunities to meet with families and students who have been experiencing all the different aspects of this disaster. And you should know that our kids and family are being well taken care of by our staff members. They have gone above and beyond to take care of them, and we continue to do that every day. I also wanted to highlight a few things that have been happening. And one of them, I'm just going to look here into my notes, is on the family and community engagement. So in September, as part of our partnership in the Lawrence Working Families Initiative, the district helped to launch a pilot paraprofessional training program. And this 9-month program has 20 parents enrolled and includes contextualized ESOL, Parapro Test Prep. It's a paid internship in our schools and a free college course. So successful students will be working in our classrooms next fall. This is one of our goals and priorities in the district. And this is part of the mission of the LWFI to increase economic stability for all of our Lawrence families. And in this case, supports LPS Diverse to hire locally. Special thanks to LCW, NECC, Valley Works, the community group, our Adult Learning Center, and of course the Family Resource Center for their collaboration to make this new program a reality. Thank you. Next, I wanted to introduce Kristen Sullivan, who is our Assessment and Accountability Member, she's going to be giving you have in front of you the PowerPoint. It was also going to be projected. So Kristen is going to take the next 20 minutes or so to walk you through this data presentation. Is on our accountability. This is summative data, of course, our MCAS. And so if you would so kindly join us in walking through this presentation, and then she's going to take all of your questions. Go ahead, Kristen.
Okay, good evening. It's my honor to be here and present the 2018 accountability data to you all. "2018 is the debut year for Massachusetts' new school and district accountability system. We're going to take a look at it and break down all of its components and try to make sense of it. It's a somewhat complex measure of how schools and districts are doing. This slide is difficult to see, but you have it in your presentation. The new accountability system now considers some of the indicators that we're used to and some new ones as well. So the first and most heavily weighted indicator is achievement, as measured by MCAS scores in English and math and science. And student growth data is also heavily weighted, measured by MCAS, the student growth percentile. High school completion data is a three-pronged component with the four-year cohort graduation rate, a new indicator called the extended engagement rate, which is the five-year cohort graduation rate, plus the students that continue to stay enrolled working towards a diploma. And then the third part would be the annual dropout rate. Another new indicator is progress towards English proficiency. This is the percentage of English learners that are meeting their annual targets on access testing, leading to being English proficient in 6 years. Chronic absenteeism is also a new indicator. It's always been a data point that's been collected, but this year it is now being added into the accountability system as a weighted indicator. And it is the percentage of students that are missing 10% or more of their days enrolled. And the final new indicator is the advanced coursework completion. This is a high school indicator measuring 11th and 12th graders that complete advanced coursework by passing their class. This includes international baccalaureate, dual enrollment classes, advanced placement classes. And again, this is a new indicator. So the highlights of the new accountability system include these new indicators, which provide information beyond achievement and growth and into other aspects of school performance. Another highlight, and an important one, is a focus on a new subgroup called the low-performing student subgroup. We're going to get into it a little bit more in the presentation, a little bit further down the road in the presentation, but it is a new subgroup that has equal weight to the aggregate or the all-student subgroup, so it's a very important subgroup. And the final highlight would be the discontinuation of levels as we know them, schools being labeled with levels. They're now going to be replaced with accountability categories. Oh, and this is not, oh, there we go, okay. So how are schools classified? The new system sorts schools and districts into categories to recognize their success and identify where support is needed. So I'm going to start over to the right. The first two categories over there, we have 10 schools that fall into this category. It's schools requiring assistance or intervention. We have 2 schools in the broad and comprehensive support category, and 8 schools in the focused and targeted support. The second category are schools not requiring assistance or intervention. We have 5 schools with partially meeting targets within that category, and another 3 schools that have met targets. So those other indicators are kind of subgroups under the big bucket of the accountability category. Lawrence continues to be classified as a chronically and underperforming district.
Can I ask a question?
Is it okay if we just finish the presentation, because it'll have many of your questions answered along the way, but can you please note that one?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and I've included a link if you're interested in diving a little deeper into this new accountability system. The link is right at the bottom of that page. So let's start right with the overall school accountability ranking. This is the ranking of each school relative to other schools statewide that serve the same grade levels. Classification is based on the school's overall accountability percentile. Each school will be assigned a percentile of 1 to 99. And it's calculated using data from every indicator, all the indicators that we saw on the slide a few slides back. Schools with an accountability percentile of 10 or lower fall into the schools requiring assistance or intervention category. So on this slide, the schools in red are the schools that require assistance or intervention. Schools with an accountability percentile of 11 or higher are the blue schools, and they are schools not in need of assistance or intervention. Accountability percentiles have been used in the past, but I just want to caution that this is a new accountability system, and we really are not supposed to, or really can't, compare performance from past accountability systems into this new accountability system. This percentile involves new indicators, and it also compares schools to different schools. Right now, all schools that are elementary and middle schools are put together into one bucket, and they're compared to each other. High schools are compared to each other, and then schools that serve students from grades 1 to 12 are in the third bucket. That's different from how it's been done in the past. So not only are schools compared to other schools statewide, but schools are compared to themselves, and this is an important component of the accountability system. Schools progress towards their own improvement targets. So for each school and for each accountability indicator and for every subgroup, the state assigns targets. And a school's performance is what makes up all the numbers that kind of make up this whole accountability system. So in general, if a school's performance declined, or it had no change, or it improved below target, there are point values with that. So the categories are declined, no change, improved below target, met target, and exceeded target. And every indicator is looked at in the same way. So the overall target percentage indicates the degree to which each school has met their improvement targets. So holistically, to round it all up together, a school that achieves a percentile of 75% or more is considered to have met target. Schools in the green that have achieved an achievement percentile of 50% or higher are schools that have made progress. So in a holistic way of trying to compare 2017 to 2018, they have made progress on their individual targets. Schools in the yellow, which achieved 25 to 49% of their points, are considered to have no change. Maybe some of the indicators went up a little bit, maybe some of the indicators declined a little bit. So in a holistic way, it's viewed as no change. And in the red, it would be schools scoring below the 25th percentile, and those schools would be considered to have declined across their indicators. So using this overall target percentage to try to drive some kind of connection back to 2017, we see that we have 4 schools that declined and 7 schools that stayed relatively stable, but we have 7 schools that have improved or met target. And if you look at those top blue schools, those schools scored 78% of their points all the way up to 89% of their points, well above that 75 percentile, which indicates that they not only met targets, but they've exceeded many of their targets. So we can take a look in the same way at subgroup performance. Again, anything in green indicates where a subgroup has met a target or improved. Okay, has seen improvement. So green is good. The first subgroup we see there in the darker blue is the overall subgroup, and that's the average of the aggregate or the all-student subgroup, and that new lowest performing student subgroup. Those two are weighted equally. And together, their average makes up the overall. We also see high needs, economically disadvantaged, English learners and former English learners, and students with disabilities. Now, having the subgroup data helps schools look and determine how specific populations of students are performing, where they're succeeding, where they need help, where they need to focus attention. Now we're going to talk about gap closing. Gap closing relates back to that lowest performing student subgroup. And let me start by explaining who's in that lowest performing student subgroup. That's a new subgroup. So that is the lowest 25% of students in a school that were enrolled in a school and took MCAS in 2017, stayed enrolled in the same school, took MCAS again in 2018. And it's the 25% of those students with the lowest average ELA and math scale scores. That's who comprises that group. It can be a group of 100 children, it can be a group of 40 children. It depends on the enrollment at the school. So as we can see here, it's the same slide as I just went over with the red and the yellow is no change, and the green and the blue are meeting targets or exceeding targets, with the arrows showing how the performance of the low-performing student subgroup impacted that overall percentage. So that's gap closing. And what I mean by that is when the lowest performing students are catching up and performing at a higher rate and catching up to the aggregate, we're calling that gap closing. We're raising the floor of the achievement floor. We're lifting it all up. That was the whole impetus behind this subgroup and including it into the new accountability system. So we have 10 schools with green arrows indicating that the performance of their lowest performing students actually elevated the overall school performance because it's weighted equally to the aggregate. We have a few instances where it actually brought it down a little bit, and a few instances where it was about equal to the aggregate. But a very positive trend to see those low-performing students moving faster, going up higher and faster. Now let's take a look at achievement. So just to clarify a few things, in grades 3 through 8, they are now taking the Next Generation MCAS test in ELA and math. And grades 10 are still in 2018, we're still taking Legacy MCAS in ELA and math, and science is also still Legacy MCAS. So as the standards and the testing evolve in Massachusetts, so has the accountability system. The Next Generation MCAS test measures new standards. It's computer-based, and it's more rigorous than the legacy MCAS tests. And also, and very important, the standard for meeting or exceeding in the legacy MCAS, in the Next Generation MCAS is much higher than for scoring in the proficient or advanced range on the legacy MCAS. So it is tougher to score meeting or exceeding in Next Generation MCAS. So what you see here is the district performance in ELA. We're realizing significant gains in grades 3, 4, and 5, Also, 6 had a nice gain in 2018 over 2017 in the percent of students that are meeting or exceeding expectations. We realized a small dip in 7th and 8th and in 10th. Next, we'll take a look at math. We saw a decline in math across grades 3 through 7, with a slight increase in grade 8 and no change at grade 10. And in science, we're seeing some nice positive results, with an increase overall, a nice strong increase in grade 5, grade 10, but a slight decrease in grade 8. And you'll see that that also is a little bit of a nod to, that's what the state experienced as well. So how did our change compare to the state's change? These tables show a comparison of the change in performance from 2017 to 2018 for the state and for Lawrence, and green indicates where the change was the same or more positive for Lawrence. In ELA, so just to explain this out a little bit, if we take a look at ELA, in grade 3, the state saw a nice bump of 5%, and we realized a nicer bump of 6%. Sometimes the change is similar to what we're seeing in grade 7. So across the state, ELA performance fell 4 points for the state, and we had a small drop of 2 points. So it's a more positive change than what the state realized. If we take a look at math across the state was relatively flat. It's up a point, down a point, no change, relatively flat. It's a new system, it's a new test. We saw some declines. But in science, we came back strong. We're seeing nice increases in grades 5 and in grade 10, with a slight drop in grade 8, not as big of a drop as the state realized. So now let's go a little bit deeper into achievement and take a look at it by school. What you see here is the 2017 and 2018 performance for ELA, math, and science. Green is great, so where you see green in the 2018 columns, that indicates that there was an improvement in the performance in 2018. And overall, 71% of our schools increased the percentage of students meeting or exceeding expectations in ELA Next Generation MCAS, 71%. And in science, 71% of schools increased the percentage of students scoring proficient or advanced. We're very pleased with those numbers. Now let's take a look at growth. Oops. Growth is continuing to be measured by the Student Growth Percentile, or SGP, as we sometimes refer to it, but there has been a change in the way it's calculated, so it shouldn't be compared to 2017 SGP, where it was the median SGP, and this year it's the average SGP. So the state has warned us to not compare the two. It measures how a group of students' achievement has grown or changed over time. And the target for all schools is to achieve an SGP of 50. So where you see green indicates where a school has achieved an SGP of 50 or higher. But in general, as a guidance, SGPs of 40 to 59 are considered the typical range for SGP. That's the typical range across the state, with 50 being the target. All of the schools in yellow and in green have achieved SGPs of 40 or higher. So 83% of schools achieved an SGP above 40 in ELA, and 72% of schools achieved an SGP above 40 in math. Let's take a look at two new indicators, progress toward attaining English proficiency and chronic absenteeism. Progress toward attaining English proficiency is a new indicator. It is the percentage of students who met their annual target, leading them to English proficiency in 6 years based on their results from the Access for ELS assessment. There is no comparison data for 2017. It's a new indicator. It includes students from grades 1 through 12. And this data is presented as elementary and middle schools. 41.8% of those students met their annual target. And at the high school level, 36.1% of students. Chronic absenteeism. Again, this has always been collected, but this is the first year that it's being incorporated as a weighted indicator into the accountability system. It's defined as the percentage of students missing 10% or more of their days in membership, and it's calculated for students in grades 1 through 12. District-wide chronic absenteeism is up slightly, up 2.5% at the elementary middle school level, and up 2.8% at the high school level.
I'm sorry, is this a percentage of the student population, or what is this a percentage of? Or is it saying that?
It's the percentage of students missing 10% or more of their days enrolled.
So 39% of high school students are missing?
Yes. Now, high school performance indicators. First one we'll take a look at is the 4-year cohort graduation rate, which is improved. This is the
I
percentage
just
of
want to ask
students.
a quick question. Are the chronic absenteeism numbers broken by school? Is that available?
Yes, that's available. I don't have it with me today, but
No,
it
I
is
understand.
available.
I appreciate it.
Yes.
Great. I'm sorry. Keep going.
So the 4-year cohort graduation rate is the percentage of students in a cohort that graduate in 4 years or less. And this is lagged by 1 year. So in 2018 accountability data, we use the 2017 graduation rate. The 2018 graduation rate is just being finalized at this point with August graduates. So that will appear in the 2019 accountability determinations. We've been seeing a steady incline across the years with a slight dip last year, but it's refreshing to see that we're back up in 2017 at 71.7%. The annual dropout rate measures the percentage of students who drop out of school in a given year in grades 9 through 12. We've been seeing a steady decline, and this year we've achieved a historic low of 3.7%. Again, this data is lagged by 1 year, so this is the 2017 data. The next indicator would be the extended engagement rate. This again is that new indicator. It's designed to recognize and encourage students that persevere towards a diploma beyond the 4-year cohort. So of the smaller number of students that need additional time to graduate, more are persevering, more are choosing to stay enrolled and continuing to work toward earning a diploma. This is a 2-year lag, so this is 2016 data, and it's on the increase. And the final high school indicator would be advanced coursework completion. Again, another new indicator, and it's designed to encourage schools and districts to offer more opportunities for more advanced coursework. It's reported as the percentage of students enrolled in 11th and 12th grade that achieve a passing score in at least one advanced course. It's important to note that a student is only counted once, so they may be taking 3 or 4 advanced placement classes or dual enrollment classes, but they only are counted once in this. That's the way that it works out. And oftentimes we have lots of children that are taking multiple advanced placement or dual enrollment classes. But it's up from 2017 to 2018 to 48.1%. And that brings us to the end of the indicators. For our next steps, we're going to be doing an in-depth analysis and provide additional supports to those schools that have fallen into the focused and targeted support or the broad and comprehensive support. We'll continue our progress with gap closing, looking at that low-performing student group, sharing successful strategies across schools and district and grade levels. And we're going to dive deeper into the new indicators of English proficiency and chronic absenteeism. Does anyone have any questions?
Why don't we, we'll start with Jess, and we'll move this way if that works for everybody, and
Can I make a suggestion?
yeah.
Mr. Chair? Can we go page by page, because we may have
Yeah.
different questions on every page?
I think that would be good, because
Okay,
I have
that-
like
That
Okay.
works.
15 questions, so I don't want to do them all at once, so, yeah.
Thank you.
So,
So I'm going to start back at the beginning, is that what?
yeah, that would be great.
I have
I'm not
to-
sure where our data starts in the examples that you have, are like, this first one are about us?
This is definitely about us, so starting where it says our schools classified, you'll see that in that bar,
Yeah, those are.
This is
those-
us?
Those are Lawrence
That's us.
schools.
Yep, that's us.
All right,
everything is us.
all right.
Everything, okay.
So
So-
that's maybe just example.
So I'm starting with, do you want me to click through and tell me where to stop?
Yeah, that, like,
yeah,
let's
this one
start there.
Let's
I just-
start here?
Some things are just clarifying small
Sure.
points. So on that one, I thought we had 34 schools. So why are just 18 showing up in the list?
That's a great question. So our early childhood centers are not measured. They do not,
Okay.
they have insufficient data, as does our high school learning center.
Okay.
So there are minimum subgroups, performance levels that schools have to meet before they are actually assigned some of this data. So,
Okay. So none of the pre-KK schools are in here because they're not, okay.
they're not taking MCAS.
Okay,
Exactly. And in high school learning center, a lot of those students come in after they've tested at Lawrence High School, or after grade 10. So it's just
Okay.
the way the numbers work, they don't meet the minimum subgroup
okay.
participation. So the
Just
data you
meaning
have here
there's
is
not enough
everybody that has.
students in the high school learning center to count as a school that we measure, or
So
they're
high
not
s-
performing well enough for us to include them in the group?
No, it's not about that. It's really about the number of students for the
Okay.
data to be valid.
Okay,
So if the subgroup is too small, it can be skewed too easily.
okay,
So the state sets minimum subgroup levels,
yep,
and the high school data is all built around the grade 10 test. So if a student
Okay.
comes in after grade 10, their data doesn't enter
Okay.
into that.
But HLC students would be reflected in measurements for like all students in Lawrence. They just don't get measured as a school? Or are they
I'm
not
sorry.
measured at all? Like an HLC student, when we look at like all Lawrence High School students, they're included in that.
They are definitely included in the district data. So
But we
district
don't- but
grade
we don't
10
measure
data
the school
includes
itself.
them. Yes.
okay,
Yes.
okay. If everyone,
Yeah,
other
a follow-up
people,
question. on that.
yeah.
Yeah.
How do we measure their progress?
How do we measure?
Those people who fall outside the sample not big enough group?
They're measured the exact same way. It's just when it comes out to reporting out in an accountability report, it's suppressed due to the low number of students in the subgroup.
We
But
also,
again,
You could,
their data does configure into all the district grade level data, all the district attendance data, all of that catches in there.
we also have additional formative data that we use that helps us also benchmark progress.
Well, what does that mean? Like,
So for
what is
exam-
that data?
Yeah, so for example, the data that is formative is driven by teachers. And so teams decide what measures they're going to be using to benchmark progress and to inform instruction. And so that
Okay.
tells us internally also, how are students making progress towards their reading, math, science, and other subjects.
Okay.
They're not summative like MCAS is, because that's once a year where they just take that. And in this case, there's only 18 schools that qualify because of the amount of students, but they all have internal measures.
Okay.
Julia, any questions on this slide?
No, I think it has been, I had the same questions about the different targets.
Noemi, any questions on this slide?
I have a question and a comment. The question was on the ELA improvement performance.
I
So
think we're
know-
going to go one slide at
Oh.
a time, if you want to wait till we get to that one.
Oh, so it was a question about that?
Just
slide?
that
Yeah,
slide
just
right
that
there.
slide.
Yeah.
Oh,
I-
okay.
Okay, good.
I do actually have one more question on this slide. It just, when it says broad and comprehensive support versus focused and targeted support, does that, like, if it's focused and targeted, does that mean that, like, the school did fine on ELA and science but bad in math? Or it's around each of these separate indicators? Or
Be
like?
focused around the indicators, it could be focused around a subgroup's performance
Okay.
within the school. So say, for example, the special education subgroup.
Gotcha. So it's
Broad and comprehensive
indicator
is would be
based.
the-
So,
I'm sorry.
no, it's like if a school is targeted for broad and comprehensive support, that basically means that they did poorly on a number of these indicators. Whereas if it's targeted support, it's what, like one or two of the indicators?
It could be, so the broad and comprehensive will assume did not meet most of their indicators.
Okay.
The majority of the indicators were not met.
Okay,
And so they're going to need additional supports. And then focus and targeted, it could have been a few subgroups, so we have to dig deeper to each school to see which subgroup, which content within that subgroup.
okay.
But the two schools that are in that other bucket they're going to be multiple indicators.
Okay, thank you.
I do have a question pertaining to the 3 schools and the 5 schools meeting targets. Do we analyze the data when we get it to see why a particular school it does well, the other one is doing a little bit better, and the others don't measure up to those targets?
Absolutely. That's,
To help us, I guess, in the process of helping the ones that are not performing as well.
oh, absolutely. And not only in the overall aggregate, but we break it down by subgroup and by grade level to see what grade levels, where there are strengths, where there are challenges. Absolutely, it is the school principals and their data teams really dive deeply into this, looking for where they really need to focus and to assess, where they put their energies. Did it pay off? Absolutely.
And do you find that when you find those areas and you focus on them with the other schools, you find that the numbers improve?
We've definitely seen
At a
that.
high rate, or?
Yes, we've definitely seen that. We can see that in the ELA performance. We've put a lot of energy into growing the foundational reading skills, and it's paying off. We're seeing the benefits with those increases of 6%, 7%.
And do we set a time frame for these schools to kind of meet these targets? You know what I'm saying? If when you find what the areas of concerns are, do we set a time frame for the other schools to meet those
Yeah, that'll be part of the work that we do now, Julia, which is we're going to dig deeper with schools, including those that haven't met all of their targets. And so with their teams, we'll sort of design what we call action plans. And we'll say, in the next 12 weeks, here's an intervention plan. In the next 10, so we do cycles of 12 weeks at a time. And so the teachers and administrators are very focused on using data to drive those plans, and then we visit it in cycles of about 12 weeks to see improvement, to see correcting of, ideas that we have, of interventions that are being tried. And then we learn from the other schools' best practices, which is your earlier question. Are we looking at who did well, and can we learn from them?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Should I move
Should we go to the next slide? Yep.
Okay.
Questions here on overall accountability rank?
So again, I just want to make sure I'm reading it correctly. Our best school, which is School R, it only did well, like it ranked in the 30th percentile compared to other schools across the state. So 70%
other
of schools
similar
across the
schools.
state are doing better than our best school.
Correct.
Okay. So, and just another question, just curious, like, is there a reason we're not identifying schools by name?
I'm glad you asked that. We should have mentioned that earlier. We're really focused, Jess, on thinking about the district as one big unit. And then our role as a larger administrative team, leadership team, and board is to differentiate that support with discretion, right? Because there's some schools that are stuck, and there's some schools that we're going to learn some best practices with. And I think, and we believe that the best way to do that is to support them and then highlight best practices, but be careful that other schools who are stuck don't feel this additional, it just doesn't feel good when people are working so hard and then get stuck and don't see the progress that they wish to see. So we're happy to show you individual data. It's also public, as you know.
Yeah.
And so, but we prefer to see ourselves as one big community.
Okay, that makes sense. I guess, and it's not that I think we need to see it, one thing that I would be interested to know is, for instance, like, are the schools who are all in the red on this slide, are they in the highest poverty neighborhoods? Are there other challenges going on that certain of the schools share that we need to think about in terms of how we address to get to Julia's point about how we make things better, right?
It's a good question, and as we continue to learn more about some of these new indicators and their performance, we can certainly get back to you and say, here's what we learned more. We learned more about these particular schools. And in some cases, we had schools who were doing really well, and then had a little slide, which we still haven't uncovered why, and then we have schools that are stuck.
Yeah.
And some were unpredictable, and some were very predictable.
Okay. Exactly. Should I move? Oh.
Julia?
Now, on this same subject, I kind of agree with Jess in terms that it would probably be beneficial, and I understand your point in terms of looking at this as a district, but the fact that we have changed the way that we look at the schools, where we're trying to give each school autonomy of having, the principle of running their own schools and creating their own not problems.
Solutions.
Sorry. Challenges. It might be beneficial to look at each school individually, not only because of the issues that Jess just brought up in terms of why they're not doing so well. Is it because of demographics? Is it because of the area? But I think this board would probably have a little bit more understanding, or might have a little bit of information to share based on each school, where it's based, or some of the information that we might gather from parents or people outside in the community. So that might be, and it also provides the school an item to kind of try and to do better and perform better when they see their numbers and they say, well, you know, and I agree with you, you don't want to put them in that position, but sometimes, you know.
No, I appreciate
Not
it. I
bad.
appreciate the feedback, and I understand the desire to be, you know, have more information about specific schools. And I think what we've learned is that having schools who are still stuck does not support the larger goal of us being this one unit of a district, because independently, we still have schools that need support that's not giving us momentum forward, and the other schools are not motivated by that. It's what we've learned from school leadership and their school teams. So we're absolutely going to be differentiating the support. We're happy to share with you, hey, can you be our thought partner in these 4 schools, because here's what we've learned more. But we don't have that information for you right now. So it's a little premature for us to sort of say, here are the 5, 6, 7 schools who should be highlighted for their progress, and schools that are doing poorly or not as we expect. I think it's just a little premature, especially in my tenure, to be revealing that.
I agree based on that, but nevertheless, I think the more we break down this information, the easier it will be for us as a board to understand it and to be able to address issues as they come up, especially out in the community.
Yeah.
So, and you know, I agree with you in
Yeah.
some areas.
Yeah, I mean, just to pick up on that point, and this is the question that I would have about several of the slides, is that maybe the next time we come together, if we could, and you don't even have to identify the schools by name to us, but it would be lovely, and I think we all want to know this, right? It's like, why? Why is this school doing better? Why did that school show
we
so
can do
much
that.
improvement? And why did this school not, or why is that school stuck?
Yeah, we're
And
happy to do
so,
that.
Yeah.
We're happy to do that.
That would be great.
I'm not going to talk long about it, but I want to add my voice. I'd like to see the names.
Got it.
Next slide.
Next slide, okay. So this slide was about the percentage of points that a school achieved in meeting their own targets. So
How do
this
they
starts
set
to
their
get down
targets?
into it.
How do they set their targets?
The state sets the targets, and so this was a new accountability system, so they used, it was kind of a cumbersome process. Do you want the nuts and bolts of that?
If you can give me the
Reader's Digest version?
big, yes.
Cliff notes.
They took a look at schools that were improving over the last few years. So they sorted those schools. The schools that were improving, they took a look to see how much improvement they realized each year. And based on that, they set targets to be fair, but based on improvement. So they weeded out districts or not districts, they weeded out schools that haven't seen improvement in the last few years and schools that had seen improvement. Of those schools that have seen improvement, how much improvement was realistic to achieve in a year? And they applied a formula to all the different schools with targets.
So
Next
this is
year, it'll
to,
be a little different. It'll be based on real
adjust
data.
from just purely SGP rating, SGP-linked ratings on schools. Is that the sense there, that like they're trying to get to something that is more thoughtful than just pure SGP,
I think so, yes. Yeah.
whereas like previously you could get to level 1 based on SGP alone?
SGP and achievement really were heavily weighted in the past.
Yep. And so this tries to adjust that to realistic targets.
Exactly, tries to add new
school-by-school
indicators.
basis.
Yeah, kind of rounding out that whole performance piece. But again, it's a new system, so they set conservative targets, or this year, they have a baseline of data. So 2018 will be a baseline. And they'll be able to really set targets going forward for 2019 and beyond. So this was a transition year.
So we've got to, sorry, just second question there. So like a target for school N could be different than a target for school J.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And a school, within a school, a target for the L population was different from a target for the students with disabilities population, which was different from the low-performing students. The numbers are, the pure numbers are just massive.
Gotcha.
Every little subgroup, every grade level, yeah, all set separately.
Any other questions on this slide?
I think that was the same as my question, which was just sort of basically like, what are you measuring here? So I think I'm understanding it. It's a variety of things. It could be some of this, right?
It is all of that.
It's all of that.
It's all of that.
But it's plus things that the state and the school decide on together in terms of,
No, the accountability system is based on that.
so it's all based on this.
Based on that.
So
But
the targets are,
individuals'
And
targets.
targets within each one of those factors.
it's different, like, so one school might say, I want to improve 4% in this area, and another school might say, I want to improve 10%.
Well, the schools don't say what they want. The
I mean,
state
the
says you
state,
need
the
to
state
improve.
says you need to improve that much in each of
Exactly,
those
and-
areas.
And the lower your performance is, the higher your target is,
Okay.
okay? That's how it's built.
So in other words, if you had a really high-performing school, like, there's a point where the only way they could grow is to actually,
Marginal.
and hit
Yes.
some
Exactly.
ceiling.
Okay. Gotcha.
So when we compare the overall accountability and the target percentage, have you found that it is the same schools that are performing well at both level, at the state level and at the target percentages? Have you had a chance to analyze that and say, oh, these are the same schools? So since we don't have them by name, it's hard for us to.
Right.
Right.
If you look at the bottom, the schools with the asterisks
Mhm.
are the schools at the 10 percentile and lower, those schools requiring assistance. So you'll see that we have some schools with asterisks that are up at the higher levels of achieving their targets. They're up in the yellow.
Okay.
It's not
We
in the
have
same-
some up in the green.
Mm-hmm.
So those are schools that, although it came out, when they ranked in statewide, they came out with a percentile lower than 10. They're making some nice progress. And actually, one of the schools that's one of the broad and comprehensive support schools is in that,
So I
is
think
one
one
of these
thing,
higher performing schools.
we'll continue what we're doing right now, but I think one thing that I will do is I will reach out to board members and we'll compile a list of questions relative to specific schools and specific indicators where we may not know the exact indicator, but we could say, please give us an example of the indicators for, so for instance, what leaps out at me on this is school D and school C
Yeah.
are in that lowest 10 and yet are hitting their targets at what seems to be an impressive rate. And so I think we'll compile a list that
Yes.
says school C and D, which will have real names next time. Could you tell us what were the indicators they were hitting and what do we see happening in those schools that, on the one hand, they're in this bottom 10, but they seem to be hitting targets and making progress? Is that the case? So I will reach out to board members and we will compile a list of specific questions for the next meeting. But that said, let's continue what we're doing right now. Any other questions on this chart? Yep, Mayor?
I actually don't have one on this chart, and I know it was my idea to go chart by chart, but I gotta go.
Want to skip ahead?
So there's the neighborhood that's impacted by the guys having a neighborhood association meeting. There's like 200 people, so I gotta go there. But I didn't want to miss the presentation. I think the questions that are being asked are reflective of the questions I would have anyway. But I want to just the slide about chronic absenteeism.
Okay.
I'm gonna focus on stuff that I feel like I can have an impact on. There's other stuff about curriculum, I'm gonna leave it up to the rest of you guys to figure out how we can maybe change those things. What's the state average on chronic absenteeism?
Oh, I'm not
What's the-
prepared to give you that number.
right.
I'm not sure. I'll circle back on that.
That's important, because I just don't, initially I just
far
wanna beat
below.
ourselves up about it, but I thought, hey,
That was
where's the state at on this? So if I can have that number,
Sure.
but
That was my question too.
But second to that is, I think regardless of where the state is, this is clearly not a number that's acceptable for all of us, for the high school chronic absenteeism. So, Mr. Chair, and we should do a subcommittee on chronic absenteeism. Then I would really enjoy spending time trying to get to the bottom of this. 61%,
I will,
60.7%. No, hold on.
I think your request makes perfect sense. I just want to say one of the things on the list that we will send over, this was the slide that I thought was most important from my perspective as well, Mr. Mayor, was not only do we need to see this one school by school and understand
Yes.
each school, but we really appreciate the thoroughness of this presentation. This is
Great
not a
job.
criticism of this presentation. I just like
Thank
where
you.
we go from here is what I
Correct,
just want to
yes.
focus on. So we need a school by school breakdown, but I would also like to see numbers on grades 6, 7, and 8, and a school breakdown on 6, 7, and 8. And I know just from all the folks in this room, I'm not telling anybody something they don't already know, but chronic absenteeism in middle school will be one of the most accurate predictors of ultimate dropout or high-risk students in high school. So we want to see 6, 7, and 8 as well.
Yeah.
Just two other things, we're gonna talk about facilities in a little while. We also had a conversation at the police, and I don't know if it's in your report, but talking about how we make our schools safer, and asked, are there anything that we can do with our schools to make them safer? And providing locks on the doors of the classrooms. May seem like an easy thing to do, but if kids can and teachers can shelter, so providing locks on all the school doors and all the classrooms. So we did an analysis on that, and we started to figure out how to pay for getting locks on the doors so students and teachers can self-shelter. And just as a party shot, I would concede to the superintendent on the issue of names of the schools, and when she's ready to show them to us long-term, I'll take it then. But I think in long-term, we would like to see the school names. Thanks.
We won't need to take a vote on this, right? It's just a presentation. But based on your suggestion, Mr. Chair, may I suggest then that we submit those questions to you, and then we could either have the superintendent or Kristen come back and go over them, so that way we'd have a time to look this over, because I
Yeah.
think we all have questions, but for the
Yeah,
sake of time,
I think that's a great
Okay.
idea.
Yeah.
That
that way
we'll
we can
compile
formulate our
questions.
questions
Yeah.
better
Sure.
and
Yes.
give you time to reply to
Sure.
us or
Yeah.
present it here so that everybody can hear them.
And I think this gives us a good place from which we can come up with precise questions.
Excellent,
Um,
excellent. There's a lot of information and a lot of
Yes,
data.
It's a lot.
And it's
It
a
is a
very
lot.
well,
It is a lot.
it's very well put together, I think,
Thank you.
for
Thank
us.
Yeah, so we appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
So let me just ask, I thank Member Silverio for the excellent recommendation that we'll take under. Are there any burning questions that people want to ask right now? Otherwise, we will move to the next item that the superintendent wants to move to, and we will compile a list of questions for an additional briefing.
I'm all set for now.
Yeah, I mean, my questions would mostly be more of the same, and so, yeah, we can email them. So,
Okay,
yeah,
great.
that's fine.
Superintendent, I'll turn it back over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next, we're going to transition to our facilities update. And so we're going to have, in a moment, we're going to be transitioning the deck slide as well. So we're going to have Anne Marie Stronach, who is our COO, share with us a facilities update that will include a comprehensive update many of the moving parts of our facilities. Hi, Anne-Marie.
Hello. Good evening, everybody. First of all, I want to thank Kristen for that very informative discussion, and given the depth of the presentation, I'm going to switch up my presentation a little bit tonight, and I hope that you can appreciate that. What you are going to see on the screen is some before and after shots, and rather than me going through, what you'll see is you'll see the school. Anything that has 2018 is the newer version of these projects, and I'm going to talk through them rather than going through every individual slide, because there's, I think, 36 of them, and they're just pictures, so I just wanted to speed up this a little bit. So, as you can see from these pictures, the before and afters are quite amazing. And some of these projects are done with the Mass School Building Authority in conjunction with the city and the approval of you as well as the city council. So we have a couple of different things going on here. First, we have two core projects that we've talked about. The first project is the Oliver Partnership School, where we are looking to build a new Oliver Partnership School, which will be a K-8 school, and we are now in the designer selection phase of that project, which means that we will be getting an architect put on board. We'll be going before the MSBA selection panel on December 17th for that. Very shortly, we are going to be asking for lots of public stakeholders' input. That will include your input as well, and we look forward to gathering the community's input on what that school will look like. And that will probably be about a year-and-a-half process, that phase of that. So once the designer comes on, we'll get into that, which will be really exciting for us as a community.
So can I ask a quick question about that? How does, like, what does that process look like for gathering the community input? Is it parent input? Is it general community input?
There will be parent input, there will be teacher input. This will be done in conjunction with the building committee and the project manager along with the architect. So the project manager will actually go out into the community. There'll be meetings set up, there'll be forums set up, there'll be teachers, there'll be administrators, there'll be a cross-section of the community. We'll be asking for this board to participate in meetings. So there's a wide variety of ways, and they usually happen over the course of a year, and depending on which phase of the project we're working on, we'll be asking for input. This is a very prescriptive project in terms of the MSBA. So basically, the educational component is where we have the most say, and we want to make sure we design a school that is going to lead us into the future so that it's not just built for today, but 25 years from now, it's space that we can change up to meet the needs of future educational needs, because they change over time. So we want to make sure that we're hitting that mark. The school is scheduled right now. We're looking at an enrollment of 1,000 students, so we're looking at a K-8. Now, that's our hope, but we have to present the MSBA with several varieties of what that project could look like before it gets approved. So that's how that process works. So this is a collaboration with the MSBA. They are our partner in this, and they have a very prescriptive formula which we will follow. It has guidelines that we have to meet in terms of space components, in terms of open space, in terms of the cafeteria, what a gym looks like. So there are some requirements that we are kind of bound to by what they believe is the best practice. And then we have other areas that we can grow in. And as I was telling the mayor yesterday, we're very fortunate. Our superintendent has been through 2 very large projects in her former community. So I'm looking forward to working with her on this, because that will bring a lot of assistance to this. The mayor is the chairman of both of these building committees, so I know that, the superintendent, I know that their community input is going to be very, very important into this project.
Great. And then I just have one more question, and I know that there's been kind of an ongoing dialogue with the schools around this, but given the fact that I think for both of these schools that are moving into the pipeline, there's a lot of new housing development happening in the downtown and Mill District area, not all of which is family housing, but
Right.
which will have some effect on school enrollment, doubtless. So is that information being sort of taken into account and shared and so on?
That is an excellent question, and the superintendent, along with the deputy assistant superintendent, Denise Snyder, and myself were at the MSBA talking about those projects and talking about the enrollment. That is why we have requested from the MSBA to have a school enrollment of 1,000 rather than 500. And as I joked to the building committee at both the Oliver and the Leahy projects, when the MSBA tells you that your enrollment is growing, you can be assured that your enrollment is growing, because they are very careful about that, because they do not want to build schools that they can't fill.
Yeah.
So they agree with us, which is why we have gotten the 1,000. We haven't gotten our enrollment certificate back for the Leahy yet, but we were just there talking about those projects that you're talking about. And
Okay.
that is why both of these projects are in the center of the city, because that's where those projects are impacting, and we believe that that's where the growth is leading us in this part of the city. So that's why we're focused on those two areas.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just a quick question on that. The 1,000 students is in both schools?
No,
Or just,
we have received, so we're in different phases in each one of these projects. The Oliver School is in the feasibility study going into the schematic design. So with that school project, we have an enrollment certificate from the MSBA allowing us to up to 1,000 students. Now, we have to prove that we are going to build that school and that we have the capacity to build for that school, but it's got to be approved by them. With the Leahy, we have just presented what we would like, which is 1,000 students, but we haven't received our answer back yet.
1,000 for each school, then?
That's
That-
what we're
that's
going
what
to,
we're hoping.
that's what we're going to strive for.
What is the current enrollment
The
in
current
each of these?
enrollment of the Oliver is about 525, and the current enrollment of the Leahy is about 550.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we kind of jumped into both projects there, so unless anybody has any questions, I think you can see the timelines that I've provided to you, and I'll let you read that on your own. And then if you flip on the other side, unless you have questions, okay. I mean, it's important for people to know that there are timelines and that these schools, I remember when we first put out the Oliver, people thought that we were going to build the school tomorrow, and it does take time. It takes about 5 to 7 years from start to finish. So the next part of the projects are acceleration repair projects. Those are what you've been seeing up on the screen. And basically, the North Common project, it finished last year. We just closed that out. The numbers that you're seeing on here are true numbers. We just finalized and sent the MSBA our final audit Tuesday, believe it or not. So as you can see, the final budget that was approved is about $1.3 million, and out of that, the city's contribution was $300,000, and the MSBA paid for $1 million of that project, and that has been a great project for this school. We then submitted 3 more applications, both 2 of them being at the Arlington with the boiler replacement and the roof replacement. I will let you know that we worked on these over the summer. As you know, the Arlington school was closed this summer, and that work is just about finished. We did have a little bump in the road while they were working on the boilers. I will tell you that the boilers will be fired up tomorrow at 4 p.m. after students are out of the building, so that we do not have any worrisome, because it does emit an odor when we're firing those up for the first time. So it's pretty exciting. It's right there. it doesn't look exciting, but it's exciting to me because it's a pretty big deal to have these replaced. In some cases, they're 60 years old, some of these things. So it is the hot water and the boilers and will definitely impact. It does not cover the air conditioning. The MSBA does not do HVAC. So HVAC is inside the wall, but boilers, I think of it as picking it up and putting it down. So if you can pick it up and put it down, it can be covered by an accelerated repair. So boilers, roofs, windows, but HVAC, which we would love to have them participate in, is a much bigger project and not something that they do. So unfortunately, we've tried.
Mary, can I ask a question on that? Because of the current situation with the gas in the city, have you taken measure to let the neighbors know, especially because the Arlington School is in such a densely populated area, that this is happening tomorrow so that they won't be surprised if somebody comes across?
You're saying the
The
surrounding
neighbors,
Yeah.
just to let them know that this is going on and there's nothing to be alarmed with, because people are very nervous about
Well
the city
aware
with
of
this
that,
whole
and
thing,
you're
so.
absolutely right, and we can absolutely send out a Connect Ed to those families. Our system does not allow us to do the neighbors, but we know that our families are the neighbors. So, as you know, you've been seeing a lot of Connect Eds from us going out, letting people know what's going on. So I know that messaging is very important to the superintendent, so that's a great
This might be
idea.
something that you might be able to ask either the inspectional department of the city or the police department to maybe post some flyers on some of the
We can put it on
areas
our
that
Twitter
people
too.
can read them. I'm just,
Yep.
so that you won't be inundated, or the police
Calls.
department with calls,
Yep,
because there's something funny going on, so just,
I appreciate that. I'm writing that down. I'll make sure that we address that tomorrow. So, and the roof is actually going to be completed next week, substantial completion, on October 18th. And similar to the North Common project, we then have to have it commissioned. There's a lot of things to close out the project. You see in the pictures of the roof, again, it looks amazing to me. And now we're not gonna have some leaks in our buildings, and I'm pretty excited about that. And the flashing that's been done all around that building is pretty amazing. And as you can see, the roof project, is $2.5 million, and the boiler project is $1.5 million. And we will receive 80% reimbursement for both of those projects as well. So it's a very good opportunity for the city to take advantage of these programs. And then lastly, the accelerated repair project done with the MSBA is the North Common Educational Complex. That's this building here. That is a $4 million project to replace the roof. Obviously, this is a very large building. It has multiple layers. We are working to our first step is to work with the Historic Commission, because we are going to have to do some flashing on this. So we're in progress. That will take place next summer, but the work on this has already begun. And we will have to ask the community's patience when we're doing this project, because we'll have to close Lebanon Street at times, and we're going to have to make some tweaks in the way that we're operating this school to make sure that that project gets done on time, so we can accept students next September, August and September next year. So those are the MSBA projects. I do have to just step back 1 minute, because I am usually joined by my sidekick, Mr. Merlino, and unfortunately, he is not here tonight, but I do want you to know that the work that's done on all of these projects is done with a lot of very hardworking and dedicated people, some of them in this room, some of them not in this room, but I just want to say that we are very blessed to have an incredible facilities team, and I just had to give them a shout out, and just let you know that Chris would be here, but unfortunately, he had an incident that required his attention, so I'm sorry for that. And then the other piece of paper that I've given you is a preview of things to come, which, as you've gotten the schedule, we're going to come back in January, and these are some of the projects that we're working on. These are not part of the MSBA. These are things that are going to be funded either by the city councilor's capital improvement plan, their 5-year plan, and that would be the boiler replacement of the Bruce, the Lala, the Leonard, and we're also trying to squeeze in the tar box. So I know that the mayor is supportive of that, so I want to just shout that out. But we're looking at lighting projects, we're looking at auditorium seating, bathroom partitions, concrete around the high school and other buildings. Obviously, these projects are going to be done within the net school spending number, so the projects themselves will not be over $150,000, but the work is going to be spread out in a way that we are, what I say, ticking off the big ticket items that are, need to be improved in our schools. And unless you have any questions, I think that that pretty much wraps it up.
I have a question,
Sure.
of course.
I love questions, so that's okay with me.
I have a couple of questions. So the first one is, and I'm just wrapping my head around all of this, so forgive me, but where does the other 20% come from on these projects? Is that the city? And
That
it's
comes from the
capital
city.
budget?
As you
Okay.
know, I go before city council and have to get the approval. And then
Okay.
I go back to the city council to work with the city council for bonding.
Okay.
And then, so the money does come from the city for the MSBA projects, as well as the capital improvement projects. So that money is, the other projects we are working on, we feel that we have a responsibility to take care of some of these projects, and we're going to have to spend some of our school funds to do that because it's that important that this work get done.
Right, okay. So the other is more of a comment, because I don't really have a solution to this, but I think the HVAC question is a pretty crucial one, especially, and maybe if there's a way to move the state on this. I mean, you talked about building the school of the future, and the future is only getting hotter, I think, as we all know. So and given the fact that, you know, just even this year, we had to close schools during the first few weeks of the school year because of insane temperatures and schools not having air conditioning. And, you know, I think it's impossible for the kids to learn if the classroom is 90 degrees. We all know that. So, you know, I don't know, I don't think, this is not like just a problem for Lawrence Public Schools to solve, but it is something that I think we need to take up with the state in terms of climate change and planning around this.
I think that everybody in the state is looking at that this year. I think you're right about that, Jess.
That's good to know, so.
Any other questions? Emery, thank you for the presentation, but also want to thank you and your team for their amazing work in the middle of a crisis that nobody would have expected, and you guys swung into action. And I know one of the first things was to get the shelters open for families, and we just want to thank you and your team for remarkable work during that time, and I know it continues right up through today, but thank you.
You're very welcome, and I will share those comments. I know that they will be grateful, and I have to say to you that it is at times like this that I really appreciate working in Lawrence, and people's passion and their commitment to their work just shines through. And somebody asked me last night if I have been through a situation like this before, and it is oftentimes that we are tested here in the resilience of this community, and the people that work here comes through every single time. And there's a testament to the people that are sitting in the audience tonight and watching this at home. So while I appreciate those comments, I'm not alone in that. So thank you, and I'll share that. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emery.
Thank you.
Just, I have a question for probably the superintendent. With the crisis that we're in right now, where a lot of the families have been mobilized out of their areas, what's happening with school transportation? I know
So-
it doesn't go into the facilities
Yeah,
report, but.
Emery can take that.
Yep, so that does come under operations as well. And basically, as people have been moved out of their homes, and whether they're in hotels or, whatever the situation is, it takes about a day or two for us to get them back into the transportation pipeline. I will tell you that there were people in this community who were making sure that our students got to schools on those day or twos. I know that there were Ubers going around and things like that. So it takes about a day or two, but I can tell you that all of those people do have transportation, and I would urge people, if they do need transportation, they should call our transportation department.
Right, that has been a question that has been raised, and I'm familiar with the fact that the school will provide the transportation regardless of where the children are, but some of the parents were not aware
Yep.
that this was available to them, and so I just wanted to make sure that we're on the right page.
Excellent shout out on that, and I know that Jess and the team that the mayor was talking about, of partnerships, we've been getting that word out as well, so we've been working on that.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
always bears repeating.
That's great. Thank you.
Just,
A very small practical request. When you guys give us stuff, can you 3-hole punch it? Because our binders are,
Joan and I were just talking about that, so we're on that too. Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
very easy.
Yep.
Okay.
the minutes from both the last meeting and the executive session were distributed via email to members. They're also in your binders at this time. I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes from the regular meeting on September 12th.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
hi.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't here.
Then, you know what? I'm going to have to postpone the vote until the next meeting because we don't have a
We don't have a
quorum, and
quorum.
you should not be voting on minutes that you weren't at, so we will hold that until we have a quorum. I should have remembered. Superintendent, any last words or any items you want to add before we adjourn?
No additional items.
Great. Any board members, any last items before we adjourn?
Just a thought. I was at a meeting this past week with one of the local banks, and the discussion of financial responsibility training or presentations came up, and I thought that might be a very good thing for the parents and the older kids in the Lawrence Public Schools, especially now that we're looking at each school having its own autonomy to do things that perhaps is something that the superintendent and the principals could discuss and maybe approach one of the banks or some of the local banks, because it's something that a lot of our children are missing out on. And the fact that a lot of the parents sometimes cannot provide that kind of support. And I think it would be a great opportunity for us to have, create a new partner, if you will, with some of the local banks to have these financial responsibility trainings at the different schools or whatever works. But it's something that maybe you should, I thought, should be brought out. And
Yeah, I'm happy to connect with them, and financial literacy, I agree, is important for all of our students across the grades. So yeah, I will look into that, if we can connect also.
Great idea. Any other comments? Great, okay, so LAE will next meet on November 14th, and again, a huge thanks to the superintendent and her team for all of their hard work through this very difficult time. I know there's a lot of people working a lot of long hours through really difficult circumstances. We thank you for that. I also want to thank Dave and the LPS media folks for everything they do for us to run these meetings, and we really appreciate it. With that, we are adjourned.